Hi, this is Mrs. Huffcutt again with another chapter from the book Miss Hickory by Carolyn Sherwin Bailey and illustrated by Ruth Gannett. Here is Chapter 2, Moon Before Snowfall. A good day to finish my canning, Miss Hickory said to herself as she built up a wood fire and started toward the forest for berries. It was a beautiful day, crisp but with warm sunshine that made her forget Crow's warning visit. Crow was so ready with raucous chit-chatter that she did not take him seriously. He always has something to say and likes to hear himself say it, she reminded herself as she put a small rush basket over her arm and stepped briskly off on her twig feet. Although the torches that the goldenrod had lighted along the October road towered above Miss Hickory's head, she found her way easily in and out among them. Their brightness made her feel happy. Farther on, the purple asters made a royal canopy beneath which she walked proudly until she came to the edge of the woods. She left the road and was at once in the deep green of the pines. Miss Hickory's nose was as keen as a fox's. The smell of pine trees never failed to go to her head. She could not explain why, but when she was alone in the woods, sniffing rich earth, wandering through the lacy lanes of ferns and smelling the pines, she felt like another person. She wished she had time to dig up one of the tiny new hemlock trees to set out at the front of her corncob house, an idea that she had treasured for some time. But the cold of the woods, now that she had left the sunny road, made her realize there would not be many more berrying days. She knelt down, dug away the leaves that were already making a thick covering on the earth. It always surprised her to feel how warm the earth kept under the leaves, even on a cold day. She dug them aside here and there, uncovering the vines that she wanted. It was as delightful to thrust her wooden arms up to the elbows in the warm tangle as to sniff the woods. She began to pick the bright red berries and filled her basket. There was no time to lose, she knew. Cock Pheasant lived close by and was a famous berry picker. Checkerberries first. They stood up straight in plain sight on their stems and could be picked fast. But for preserving and storing away in her acorn jugs for the winter, Miss Hickory knew that the checkerberry preserve needed a good deal of sweetening, more honey than she had been able to save that season. She picked a few checkerberry leaves. They were tasty and crisp, served with a cup of tea. There's a picture of her picking berries. Next, the partridge berries that ripened close to the ground, little crimson balls and twins, two growing side by side secretly on their low-lying running vine. Miss Hickory canned partridge berries whole in their own sweet juice. As she finished gathering berries and started home with her filled basket, she remembered something that Cock Pheasant had once told her. When the partridge berries are ripe, Cock Pheasant had said, it's only 2 full moons before the first snowball. When she came home, Miss Hickory saw that the entire front of her house was covered by the fat, brittle haunches of Mr. T. Willard Brown. He was enjoying the sunshine that trickled down through the bare lilac bushes and waving his long tail to and fro like a banner. He was a wandering barn cat, a hunter of renown, but Miss Hickory liked him. Mr. T. Willard Brown lived a secret life closer to the ground than did Crow. He was a newsy man and willing to share his stories. You are late this morning, she told him. The milking was late, he explained. I can't start the day without my regular breakfast of a dish of warm milk right from the cow. Miss Hickory set down her basket of berries, came close, and looked sharply into Mr. T. Willard Brown's green eyes. That would have been a better story, my friend, she said, if you had washed your face before you told it. There is a feather sticking out of your mouth. She flipped it off. Oh, my ears and whiskers, he exclaimed in mock chagrin. However did I get into feathers so early in the morning? Now, if it had been tea time here at the old place and I had dropped in and someone had urged me to take a nap on one of those soft feather pillows, he purred loudly to cover his embarrassment. Never mind, she said. We all know your habits, Mr. T, and I'm glad to see you this morning. Crow called a few days ago. Don't speak of him, Mr. T. Willard Brown spat. I wouldn't eat Crow on a wager. The last time I saw Crow, he walked right toward me and said a bad word. I spat at him. If you ate Crow occasionally, you might be a better man, she told him. What I was about to say when you interrupted me was that Crow spoke of the family as planning to leave Hillsborough for the winter. He said that Great-Granny Brown was thinking of living at the Woman's City Club on Beacon Hill, Boston, and Anne was going to school there. Nothing but hearsay on his part, of course. Mr. T. Willard Brown rose, stretched, and yawned. Not a plan, not hearsay, my love, he said to Miss Hickory, but the truth. They have gone. She listened without words, her eyes full of horror. or terror. He continued, "You ought to get about more, Miss Hickory. All summer you've stayed here under the lilacs, only going to the woods for berries, or on Sunday when Jack in the pulpit preached. If you had gone around to the front of the house lately, you would have seen trunks coming down from the attic." "God," she breathed at last. Now she knew that it was true. She would not let him see her cry. Instead, she stamped her twig foot. "It's all your fault, Mr. T. They had to leave to get away from you, scratching on doors and purring in the kitchen for milk. You're only a cat with a cat's ways. I shall tell all Hillsborough what your given name is, Tippy, because you have a white tip to your tail. Willard is for the barn where you were born. Brown is a pretense. The hyphen is putting on airs. You are sly, Tippy. I always suspected it." He purred loudly, curling his claws and smiling. "I am so famous a mouser that my given name and my humble birth are always overlooked. If you doubt Crow and me, why not go around to the front of the house and look in? See for yourself." He walked with flowing tail toward the barn. Miss Hickory was unable to move for a space. She watched Mr. T. Willard Brown swinging his sides and disappearing at last through the wide red doors of the barn. That's what he looks like. Then she walked slowly away from the lilac bush, the corncob house, her basket of berries. She skirted the garden, crossed the lawn, and came to the pink rambler rose trellis beside the front porch. Up the trellis she climbed, braving the sharp thorns, up until she could peer underneath the crack of the window where the shade was not completely pulled down. Blue rocking chairs stood empty and still. The fireplace was boarded. The family Bible on the center table was folded carefully in a white towel. The shining brass pendulum of the grandfather clock hung motionless, and the hands pointed to 8 o'clock. It must, by the shadow on the lawn sundial, be noon now. The old farmer's almanac that had hung by a loop of string on the wall was gone. She had been alone without knowing it for some time. She knew now that everything that Crow and Mr. T. Willard Brown had told her was true. Her head would have whirled if it could. She felt too weak to hold on to the rose trellis, but she backed down slowly. Mr. T. Willard Brown was waiting for her, having come softly around the corner of the house. "Well, there you are, Miss Hickory," he purred. "Two of us in the same fix. Why not come over to the barn with me? It has to be kept open all winter, and I have been offered a permanent position as head ratter." "I wasn't born to live in a barn," she told him desperately. "Where then?" he asked. "I'm going home," she said. "Today I shall finish my canning." "Home?" he smiled. "Amusing, that. I just passed your house, and it was occupied. You know Chipmunk, of course, who lives in the stone wall and has been so spoiled with gifts of peanuts that he expects to be supported. He has moved into your house, Miss Hickory. I should say that he is there for the winter. He was finishing his dinner when I saw him your basket of berries." Uh-oh. Let's see what happens next in Chapter 3. Up Mackintosh Lane. Miss Hickory never remembered how long she sat on the ground under the rambler rose trellis. If she had been living in her own home at the back of the house, she might have cried. But that small corncob home, so cozy and familiar, was now occupied by Chipmunk. Here, with the open road in front, she was too proud to show her sorrow. More than sorrow, she felt despair. You see that on her face there? She became damp with the heavy dew and then stiff with the first frost. The wind whistling down from Temple Mountain whipped her wet skirts around her shivering legs. None of the few passers-by noticed her. Mr. T. Willard Brown, warm and busy in the barn, gave her no thought. A light flurry of snow powdered her cap. But one day, when Miss Hickory was sure that her end was near, down the road from the orchard, walking briskly, came Crow. Would he, too, pass her by? No. Crow turned into the front path and approached. He came close to the spot where Miss Hickory huddled under the poor shelter of the rambler rose trellis. He raised one foot in salute. "Dear lady," Crow croaked, ignoring her bedraggled state. He understood that she had suffered a great loss. He was a busybody and had heard about Chipmunk. "Don't try to explain, Miss Hickory," he said hoarsely. "We all have our troubles. I told you something would turn up. It has." "What?" She stood up and leaned against the trellis. "First of all," he told her, "you must realize that a change, travel, a new scene are good for all of us. Especially you, Miss Hickory, need a change. You have been living for 2 years with those who feel that they need a grocery store, a Ford car, a stove, and storm windows. You have grown soft." She held out her arms, no longer proud. "Don't preach to me, Crow. What has turned up?" "A new home for you." He gave a hop, jig, step, and a swing for show. "Don't ask any questions, but come along with me. There isn't any time to lose. I shall very likely be off for good tomorrow, and I want to see you well settled in before I leave. Come with me, dear lady." Miss Hickory stumbled weakly toward Crow, but he caught her underneath one wide black wing. His wing was like a tent, warm and strong. His big yellow feet guided her small twig ones as the two left the old place behind and took to the road. He shortened his steps to suit hers, talking earnestly in his rough voice as he led her toward the orchard. "You spoke of the untidiness of my nest. How right you are, Miss Hickory. Stifts, chaff, and bark are all I ever use. But please realize that I am a man of affairs. I spend my days here and there, in the cornfield, the orchard, the vegetable garden. All I need in the way of a home is a place to hang my hat. But my nest is built high at the top of a tall pine tree as a lookout. From it, I saw your new home." They reached the orchard. "Turn this way," he told her. "We're going to follow Mackintosh Lane along the side hill. You can't imagine how sheltered it is there, under the lee of the mountain with the pine woods up above it for a windbreak. Lean on me, Miss Hickory. We are almost there." As they found and took the stubble-grown path where the older apple trees had twisted in odd bent shapes, the better to climb the side hill of the orchard and reach the sun, Miss Hickory felt herself floating rather than trudging along. She was lifted off her feet every now and then as she clung to Crow's wing. She felt again the energy the woods always gave her. The exercise of trying to keep up with Crow warmed her. Her heart pounded with excitement, for she believed that Crow was helping her to begin a great adventure. Perhaps a small log cabin with a fireplace and a chimney was waiting on beyond. When she had signed the lease, she would return, evict Chipmunk, and move her things up here to the side hill on Mackintosh Lane. "Is it much farther?" she asked. Crow was muttering and did not answer at once. He had never been able to count above one. One cherry gobbled down, one plump green pea, one mouthful of corn. His father had taught him the corn planting rule. One for the cutworm, one for the crow, one for the farmer. "Never mind the rest of it," Crow's father had said. "It signifies nothing for us until later." Due to Crow. So Crow was not counting the trees on the side hill, but naming them. Cherry, Northern Spy, Clapp's favorite pear, Mackintosh, Tosh. His tongue was becoming twisted. "Here we are," he told her at last, as they were halfway or so up along the side hill and deep among the leafless, gnarled shapes of the apple trees. He stopped beneath one that had not seemed worth pruning that spring. The branches touched the ground and leaped comfortably towards the slope of the hill away from the wind. He loosed his hold on Miss Hickory and hopped towards a low-lying bough. "Climb up," he ordered. "But I don't understand," she hesitated. Crow spread his wings and disappeared among the branches of the apple tree, but his voice croaked down to her. "He who hesitates is lost. Do you or do you not want to live until spring? Climb, I told you." She grasped the low bough. How homelike it fell in her strong little twig fingers. "Swing a bit and then jump." Crow's call came to her from higher up. This she decided was a game that he wanted her to learn. She pulled on the bough, swayed pleasantly a moment, and then jumped to another branch further on. "Keep on," Crow croaked. "Climb along up." So she continued to swing, jump, and climb, feeling more adventurous and bold with each step. Up, Miss Hickory climbed into the apple tree until the ground was dizzying to look down upon, and she could see Temple Mountain keeping vigil to the west. "How much farther?" she called. "Here you are," he answered from a perch right beside her. "Careful now, easy does it. How's this, dear lady, for your new home?" She looked in astonishment at what he pointed out to her, a large and deep nest, resting securely in the crotch of the apple tree. Crow knew that it might not suit her at first sight, so he began to argue and boast like a real estate agent. "Light and heat-free whenever the sun shines. A long lease. Although Robin built it for his own use and planned to stay north this winter, Mr. T. Willard Brown drove him away. Hooks for hanging your clothes. Robin builds carelessly and leaves twigs sticking out. Insulated against the cold with good country mud." Crow's sales talk went on and on, but Miss Hickory had not listened after he had mentioned Mr. T. Willard Brown. No cat, she decided, would drive her out of her home. She balanced on a bough and inspected the empty nest. It was indeed well placed. shouldered and strong. Here's a picture of it. As she peered inside, she saw that the wind had cushioned the empty nest deeply with milkweed down and lined it with rose-brown oak leaves. She stepped inside and sank down deliciously into its warm comfort. "Not bad at all, Crow," she admitted. "It struck me favorably," he croaked. The nest was so well suited to her size that when she stood up she had to stretch a bit to pull herself out. When she lay down, as she now did, for she was very tired, she was snug and unseen. She was alone in a world that had no need of the things she had left behind. "I don't know what I shall do here all winter," she said, "without a broom in my hands." "You'll find plenty to do," he told her. "New things to collect, new friends, new places to explore. Well, it's time I was off. I'm greatly obliged to you, Crow." She leaned over the edge of the nest as Crow opened his wings. "Don't give it a thought," he said. "How long until spring?" she ventured to ask. "They took the old farmer's almanac to Boston." "It doesn't matter," he assured her. "Spring always comes. Remember this, though, dear lady. This is important. Get it through your head. Keep your sap running." Crow spread his wings, cawed loudly, and started. Miss Hickory watched Crow cross the old place, the barn, and the woods, then disappear as he flew towards the south. And that's the end of chapter 3.